Good morning, everyone. We'll be getting started in about 4 minutes. So make sure you got your coffees ready or what other morning beverage you enjoy. I have to say that part now since I've discovered not everyone is a coffee drinker. Incredibly shocking to me. Hi, Casey.
Hi.
I'm so glad you decided to join this morning.
Well, we were trying to get links to I just didn't have anything sent to me. So she just sent me a copy of all the links.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I've had a few people reach out to me this morning for those links as well, so I've got them ready to pass out if needed.
Gotcha. I think I signed up for something every session.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited about this morning's session. So, but the stuff is, I get all excited about it.
I know. Well, as I'm building my D2L and I'm making my HTML, every little thing I do, I go, oh, Mary Helen, be so proud of me. And she can see what I was doing today.
I am. I am. All right, we have about 1 minute left. So I'm going to ask those of you who do not have bandwidth issues, please turn your cameras on so I can see you and we can see one another. That's a very helpful for me to be able to see you guys, but especially since we're talking about discussions, let's turn on our videos if possible. I do know that sometimes people have bandwidth issues, and if you're on limited bandwidth, don't hesitate to turn yourself off. So I'm going to go on and get started. Good morning and welcome to the first Exceed Summit. The session you're in now is Student Discussions in the Online Environment. My name's Helen Hendrix, and I'm the director for the Center for Teaching Excellence at Midlands Technical College. A couple of little housekeeping tips. I already mentioned cameras on if at all possible. If you can't hear me, I have a mute button on my headset that sometimes presses itself, or my chair presses it. So if all of a sudden my voice goes away, someone please interrupt me, unmute yourself and let me know. If I'm talking about slides and there's no presentation, stop me and let me know, hey, turn the presentation on. And I think the last piece is I find it very difficult to monitor the chat at the same time that I'm talking. So if you have a question that you think can wait till towards the end, go on and drop it in the chat. But if you have a pressing question and you need to know an answer, then feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. Or ping Alicia Ramberg, and she will interrupt me. That way you don't have to feel like you're the one doing the interrupting. Alicia, I hope you're okay with that. All right, so let's get started. I've got three major objectives today. One is to show you how to evaluate a discussion prompt for generativity and genuineness. And I'm going to talk later about what I mean by those terms. I want us to look at the characteristics of an online discussion that can motivate student participation. And then I want to look at three discussion strategies that, while they're great discussion strategies and approaches, they also can be used to reduce your grading load, because I know that's a big part of the discussion board. Is it's a great tool to use in a classroom, but it can be overwhelming. Now, as we go through this, I want you to focus in the back of your head, keep one essential question in mind, and that is how your discussion activity promotes the transfer goals of your course. And I want to clarify what I mean by transfer goals here, because a lot of times when we hear transfer goals, we think of, transferring from a community college to another college. But what I'm actually talking about is knowledge transfer. What is the ultimate desired accomplishment? What in the end should your students be able to do with all of the content that you give them if your units are successful? So really a transfer goal answers the question of why should I learn this, or what can I do with this? Now I am going to show you these as strategies, but I want to share that none of these are one and done. All of these strategies, when you want to try a new technique in the classroom, it's always going to require you to do it more than once. Students aren't going to benefit from it if you only do it one time. They need to be exposed to it over and over. So kind of think about that as we go through this. Now, this is a starting point. I'd like you to kind of unmute yourself and let's talk about this for a minute as a group. Some of you share with the rest of us how you use discussion boards and why you use them. Melissa, do you like to share?
I can, sure. I use discussion boards in my math classes online, and one of the main reasons is I really want the students to have a chance to talk with each other about any math problems that they found challenging. They do that when they're in a classroom together, but when they're online, I do struggle getting them to do this. They end up just saying, this was hard. And then I'll say, would you post a problem? And maybe we can talk about it together. I think that the math students have trouble transferring from what they're working on their paper to written discussion. So I'm basically here to try to determine how to make that better.
Excellent, excellent. How about the rest of you? How do you use discussion boards? What's their purpose in your courses?
I'll go. So I use them in literature classes, and especially in online classes. You know, now that we have things like this, but I used to use them mainly so that they could actually engage in a discussion about the works themselves and see the different perspectives, come up with different questions. And we're able to do that a little more synchronously now with this, but we still have asynchronous classes. So I use them to give them a chance to write about the work, to practice documentation, and to engage with each other about literature.
Thank you, Chuck. Anybody else want to share how they use them, and maybe in a different way? So, Allison, did you want to share?
I'll share.
Thank you.
So I use it where when I post different things, they can have a breakout discussion together and then come back together so they can explain how they got to where they got to and actually work together to bring about different thoughts. Instead of me always giving the information, they can actually bring back what they learn from each other.
Wonderful. That was Patricia, right?
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. That's actually what my goal for discussions is too. And that's what we have to think about. That's our starting point. Anytime we want to do a discussion is, you know, what is our goal? What do we want to see students do? Do we envision this open-ended, in-depth and exploration, a challenging of complex issues, or do we just want to lead them to a prescribed answer? And my approach to a discussion is I want it to spark students to raise their own questions. I want them to do interpretation. I want them thinking and discussing the way I would in a classroom, not just looking for a specific answer. And I say that because discussions give students opportunities to practice a lot of skills. And a key one is discussion and collaboration and the process of thinking more deeply. This gives them the ability to articulate and defend positions. This gives them a chance to consider different points of view. And the real thing it does for me is strengthens understanding. Now, I use that term very carefully because, of course, when I'm writing learning objectives with faculty, I always say, we don't want to use the term understand. Students will understand how to do this because you can't observe understanding directly. But when I'm mentioning understanding here, I'm talking about looking for things like the capacity to explain something, the ability to interpret or apply or shift perspectives, the ability to empathize and self-assess. All of these serve as indicators of understanding. So we can see them when the students are engaging in a discussion, how they do this. So this serves a really formative purpose. One of the things I want you to think about this from the formative perspective is, do you think, and if you will, I want a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the reaction tool. Thumbs up if you think pretty much most of our students come to us prepared to have an engaging, deep discussion where they can engage one another and know how to have real discourse, or a thumbs down if you think most of them come without a really strong understanding of what a discussion is. Okay, I see one or two thumbs up, but primarily thumbs down. And that plays into my next thought, which is, how do you create equity in a discussion forum? Because all of our students don't come equally prepared to participate in meaningful discussions. Their preparations might be different. Some people are going to have been exposed to discussions where all you're looking for is a right answer. And they may not be prepared to go deeper. They may not be prepared to share their insecurities or to share their lack of knowledge, because a lot of times we get pinged for not knowing something. So we kind of have to lay the groundwork to help students learn to collaboratively engage in discussions and grapple with these challenging ideas. We want them to do this deeper level inquiry. And so I'm going to show you 3 techniques that will switch control from you to your students and provide a more equitable space to develop the skills and understandings that we want them to develop as a faculty member. So my goal in showing you these is to help you create authentic collaborators, communicators, and self-evaluators. And handing control over to the students can feel really uncomfortable at first. There are going to be some awkward stops and starts. There's going to be some silences, but over time, we're going to model these behaviors and get them responding and actually really engaging in these. Now, I have given you, I'm going to share information with you today, but in the resources document, I provided you links to most of the resources that I've used for this, books that you can use to follow up on them, and I'll share more about that at the end. So the first technique we're going to look at is one called fishbowl. Any of you ever heard of the fishbowl strategy? Thumbs up. Anybody? Okay, well, fishbowl strategy is kind of what it sounds like. It's like looking into a fishbowl. We're going to reimagine the discussion board construct using this fishbowl strategy. And the way that works is you introduce the challenging topics that students have to discuss. And you've got students divided into two groups. They are an inner circle and an outer circle, okay? That inner circle is the group that is going to have the discussion. It's just going to be a small group. And I'm going to show you how this works in a minute in our synchronous one, but you can do this asynchronously too. You set up different discussion board groups and you have the different ways they're going to interact. So the inner circle are challenged to participate in a high level discussion. The outer circle actually observes the discussion, critiques both the content, the logic, and the process. So this serves two formative purposes. One, it provides a structure for in-depth discussion, and it provides opportunities for students to model and observe group processes in a discussion setting. So basically, we're kind of group norming here. We probably will need to supplement because students asking deep questions is a real skill. It's not something that people do automatically. And so we may have to provide them with prompts initially that help them get to thinking the way we want to. But what we're going to do is practice this. You create a prompt, the inner circle is going to respond to that prompt. They're going to have a discussion. You give them a time frame in your asynchronous class that they do that, and everybody else is just reading and watching. Then everybody critiques the inner circle. They bring up the ideas of maybe where the group could have gone deeper, what information might not have been shared, and just go back and forth. And each week, a different group, or each discussion, let me say, not each week, the inner circle switches around. The group you are grading is the inner circle each week. So you're not grading all 30 students in your class, you're grading the inner circle. The outer circle is going to get more of a participation grade for the types of information, and you're going to have provided a rubric that tells them what you're looking for in that. And that's the really critical piece of this. And I use rubric, I should say criteria, because we're using this so they know what we're looking for. We're not necessarily using this to grade them with this rubric, okay? This trains students to work collaboratively. Learning to frame those questions, though, we may want to give them question stems, question prompts, such as what are the implications of something? How would this be converted to an action plan? What assumptions or biases are hidden in what we're studying? What evidence supports these theories? These are the kind of deep questions that even experts in the field will be grappling with, and we want our students grappling with these too. So what I'd like to do is show you how it would work in an asynchronous mode. And in the links I give you, there's also discussions for how you'd set this up, just instructions for how you would set this up to do asynchronously. But I'm going to be looking right now for 4 to 5 volunteers. Can I get 4 volunteers? And you are going to actually have a discussion based on a prompt I'm going to give you. So who are I see Allison. Who else? Casey. I need at least 2 more. All right, Chuck, 1 more. Anybody? We really need 1 more person. All right, I'm going to show you a prompt and then I'm going to send you to a breakout room. I want you thinking about this in the breakout room. And while you're in the breakout room, I'm going to talk to the rest of the group about what they're going to be doing. So you are going to be my inner circle. So let me send you to a breakout room. All right. Allison, you said you'd be willing. Chuck, you said you'd be willing. Casey, I believe you said you'd be willing. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to jump in here and pick a 4th person randomly. Let's see. Heather, I'm going to send you in there too. All right, so you should be prompted to join a room, the 4 of you. Only the 4 of you will go to the room and consider the prompt. All right. So the rest of you, what you're going to be doing when they come back, they're going to have a discussion. And I want you guys focused on some specific things so that you can share this with them after the discussion. I want you to notice whether they stay on target. I want you to notice whether they're using clarifying statements and supporting the things they're saying, or are they offering just opinions? Did they cover everything you could think about in terms of this? Is there a sense of progression? Are they moving the discussion forward or is it stalled? Are they interacting as a group or is somebody really a distinct leader? And then finally, is everybody participating and are they participating equally? Okay. So does that make sense? Everybody got an idea of what they're going to be observing? All right, so I'm going to get our guest back, our volunteers. And as soon as they get back, we'll get them started. Are there any questions while we wait for them to return?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And that question is about the recording of the session. I have an on-campus meeting at 9 o'clock.
It is being recorded. And we will be sharing the links.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't stay the whole time, but this other meeting was scheduled first. And
I understand.
But I did want to come.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you could join us while you can. All
Thank
right.
you.
So.
That was not enough time.
No, that's okay. That was just for you to think about it, because now you guys are actually I would like all 4 of you to turn your cameras on. The rest of us can turn our cameras off. The 4 of you will now discuss the prompt and do it just like you'd have a normal discussion. And we're just going to observe.
Oh, I have to turn on. Hold
So
on.
we've got Allison, Casey, Chuck, and Heather. You guys are the ones that are going to discuss what are the characteristics of a highly engaging discussion prompt. What's going to really compel your students to respond deeply?
Open-ended questions is what many of us were talking about. Also, in my classes, I like to let students kind of feel their way through the questions. I don't like to give them questions that ask yes or no, just like the open-ended stuff. In literature classes, if we're reading a story, I might put a prompt up. For example, we read the play Antigone, and I ask them, something like, who do you align yourself with in the play? Antigone, Creon, Haman, who any of the characters, and they don't have to even particularly pick the main characters. They can pick someone that I didn't think of. They may say, I align with the Sentry because he's funny and I'm funny or whatever. And they have to explain to me why they align themselves, think about themselves when they think about these characters in that particular play. So it's kind of fun for them. And then they start telling me all kind of stuff about their families. They start talking about how, the play, if someone says I align myself with Antigone because she is strong, I would like to think that I would be loyal to my family over loyal to the state. One girl went and she started talking about how, I align myself with Ismini because, she was considering the time period. Hey, we're only women. And she said, I think that I'm that type of person. I would love to be brave, but I'm not as brave as that. I would love to say that I could be like Antigone, but I know that I'm not. And then one girl was talking about the suicide in the play and how it connected to her family because she knew a couple of people in her family that committed suicide. So when they're open-ended and they're asked, these questions that kind of can be related to real life, they just keep going and going, and then they start talking to each other. I don't even have to prompt them to talk to other people because once they read those discussions and see how, okay, you align yourself with Antigone. Oh, I agree. I'm just like that. I'm just like you. I have so many brothers and sisters, and I'll fight for them. So, but that's what I do, and I'm talking way too much. So.
No, I agree with Allison and the open-ended stuff and trying to be reflective and bringing them into it as well. And another member, I can't remember exactly who it was, talked about the creativity. And so they need to be somewhat engaging and fun, like along kind of with that. On some discussions, I will have them, it's like they give their own answer. And then others, I make them give a groupthink answer. And so one of the things that I like to do sometimes with short stories is I'll have them, they have to cast it as a movie. And so I make them choose who would they cast in certain roles, because through that I can see how they see different characters, and how do they feel about, are they going to colorblind cast? Are they going to gender blind cast? Are they going to try to go very specific if it's more traditional versus if it's a work closer to today? So I agree with that. The open-ended reflective where they get to have like a personal entry into there is helpful. I don't like them to simply give me plot elements. No yes or no answers. No, I can look up and here's the answer on page 22. Nothing like that. More analysis, more thought.
But also with that, when you're talking about the element stuff, when I use the elements, I tell them, okay, pick out one symbol in Barn Burning by William Faulkner and discuss why it's important to the story. So it's kind of like I prepare them to get ready for the test and their essays, because every discussion question that I give them, it helps build their thought and their thinking process, that critical thinking for their essays. Because when I look at the essays, that's what I look at. I look at, do you know these elements? Can you pick out these elements and tell me why they're important to the story? So if I say, name one symbol in Barn Burning, and of course everybody's going to say fire. Well, why is it important? And then they take that element, that paragraph that they wrote after I've looked at it and graded it and helped them, they can actually put that into their essay. And so if we've talked about symbolism, if we've talked about setting all of that in a discussion question, I tell them you can actually take that discussion answer and put it in your essay. So it's not like we leave this discussion and this is asynchronous and synchronous. So especially online, they do this because I have them write it out. This is more for like my online classes that I've been teaching, but they love the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm not just going to see this discussion question one time. It's going to come up on an exam. I can be able to use this in my essay.
That's awesome. Especially if the students can realize that the discussions will help prepare them for their test. For me, I'm thinking about the prompt should be short. It doesn't need to be very detailed. It shouldn't. I find if students have to read a lot to figure out how to answer a discussion question, they don't seem very engaged. So it should be kind of concise and like Chuck was saying, something that's creative, lets them use their creativity or their imagination, let them write a story or let them reflect on themselves and how whatever they're engaged in or whatever the question is, how it affects them, I think motivates them to respond more authentically and deeply.
They like stuff like that.
When
They-
we do, excuse me, when we do discussion questions with nursing, I try to look at it through a care plan standpoint for them to be engaged and to reflect back about the disease process, what system it attacks, and then how does it relate to how are we going to get to the end of the healing process of, you know, signs and symptoms, labs, diagnostic procedures. And we try to get them to discuss from point A to get to point D, which would be the healing process, and get through that disease and where are they at the end? How did they get from here to the end? So such as if someone was diagnosed with hypertension for the very first time, what were their signs and symptoms? What brought them to the doctor? Then what led them to now they're having to control that hypertension at home with the diet, medication, but go from point A to point B. How did we get from there to here? And that is part of that discussion to reflect back on just that disease process and what system does it affect.
All right. Thank you guys for being our volunteers. I want to look at the prompt one more time, and then we're going to go to our discussion. So the rest of you, I want you to pitch in. Now, our discussion prompt was, what are the characteristics of a highly engaging discussion prompt? What makes the discussion prompt engaging? What types of questions are most likely to motivate students to respond? And we had a group of faculty do a discussion. So now let's look at this. And some of you share your observations. What did you see during that interaction?
Hey, I'll go.
Thank you.
I'm Felicia. So they did stay on topic, but I feel like it happens in every discussion. There were some dominant people, which is not a bad thing. But in terms of students, if I was, students, I want sort of the shy people to try to talk more, because, you always have students who are going to just love to talk or like to engage, stuff like that. But I did notice that. So that's definitely something that I wrote down to note. In an online thing, you see, certain people dominating, because that's good, because that shows me that they're into the content. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that would alert me that maybe, let's pay attention to the people that are not talking. Why are other people not talking? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to share an observation? So part of this now is the debrief, because I'm going to put you guys on the spot. We are faculty and we are more developed than our students. But you four, I imagine, found it difficult or challenging. When you went into that room, did you guys, Chuck, can you share with me, did you guys start kind of talking about the prompt?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
like someone read, I think it was Allison kind of read out the prompt again, because a couple of us had tried to take notes about it. So reiterated what the prompt was, and then a discussion immediately started, and all four of us were able to contribute to it before that little timer rudely threw us out.
So the instructions were to think about the prompt so that you would have the discussion you were having in there in front of us. And in a classroom, that's really easy. But you can see even in the asynchronous, it's hard to articulate. It's hard because we're used to hearing certain things. And so our brains interpret that. So the purpose of this, and the purpose of me doing it this way, is to show how critical it is for us to articulate to our students the purpose of what we're doing. So I want to talk about a critical piece of this anytime you do it with students, is you talk to them about how the discussion went. What did you observe? Was it balanced? Were points supported by evidence? One of the things that happens in a real discussion is you ask each other questions. When we're having a discussion about a topic we're engaged in, we ask expanding questions. We might challenge one another. Well, how do you deal with this? So part of this process for any of these is making sure that early in the semester, you teach your students what it is you're looking for. Because what we want to do, that question I ask about what are the characteristics of a highly engaging discussion, I pulled out from what you guys were saying that one, open-ended questions are pretty good. Creativity, so crafting students to sort of drive students to go just beyond the facts. I heard talk about meeting community. Allison talked about how it got her students engaged with one another and relating them to their real life experiences. So those are the kinds of things we're looking for, but we're also looking for what would have made that discussion better. So when we're teaching students, anybody think of something that could have made that discussion go a little better? Pull in somebody who wasn't contributing very much. How would you have furthered that discussion? If you knew that this was the purpose, the characteristics of a highly engaging discussion, what kind of question would you have asked?
If we had had more time to discuss, I would have asked more questions like, can y'all show me an example of a question that you've asked? Because sometimes I think I've asked an engaging question or a prompt and it's not that engaging after all. So I think a time limits you and to be able to go deeper into some of that discussion.
Well, the cool thing about the fishbowl in action is you want to make sure that your students are prepared in advance. That's why I said you might have to give them some question prompts or things, but when they come in there, you've already talked to them about, let's say, a topic in one of your classrooms. Lloyd, perhaps one of yours is some diagnostic method or some particular theory or different theories of looking at a particular mental illness. Dr. Pilkington is a psychologist, so that's why I'm picking on him. I happen to know what he does. What we want to do is give the students enough information that they can engage with the question while others prompt. So to dig deeper, one of the things I would have liked to have seen is guidance to one another. Okay, we're looking at highly engaging discussion prompts based on what you've just said. What would be the characteristic from that description of your discussion that made it work? So you guys told me what worked for you, but you didn't tell me what the characteristics of it were. So as the instructor, had we been doing this online, I would have emailed you guys. So let's say you guys had responded to one another the way you did in here. Those 4 people, what I would probably have done was I would have sent an email to Allison and saying, okay, that was a pretty cool description. What with all that you guys have said, what characteristics come out? What are these things that 4 of you have shared? What do they have in common? So what you want to do is get the students, you want to model the kind of thinking you want your students to do. And that's how you participate in the beginning, but not by leading the discussion, but by asking the kind of questions you want them asking one another. So early in the semester, if you're doing this, you're doing more of those prompting questions. You might be sharing a little more in the observation. But as it goes on, students begin to take ownership of it themselves. And the responses, there's a lot of science that goes behind the idea that discussions are really powerful learning tools. And in the references I've shared with you in the Google Doc, there are books that go into the science, there are papers that go into the science. So if you want to see the evidence behind these things, but what's really interesting about discussions, and this is where I say, turn it over to the students. Students who don't know the answer, but have a discussion, even though they don't know the answer, they still perform better on post-test than students who did have the answer. So the discussion itself helps students. We're too far removed from being novices to remember that novice mind. But two students, if I get it and another student doesn't, I know what I've recently grappled with to get it, because I am a novice. I am more likely to see the spots that student's struggling with. So it's really important. This is really about putting the onus of engagement on the students. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I had a question.
Yes.
Can you kind of like give me, like how you saying like a model of what you mean, model it for the student? Because like when I'm in the class and when I'm online, I kind of feel like I'm always modeling. If I give them a prompt to answer, I actually go in and I answer the prompt as a student myself. So I want to know, what do you mean by model? What does that look like? Because I think I'm doing it, but I might not be doing it.
So when you model, tell me, so you write a response like you want to see from them, right?
Yes.
How do you interact with the other students in the group? Give me an example.
So if I ask them, let's say that symbolism question.
Yes.
I would choose a symbol that they might not see in a story like barn burning. Everybody chooses fire. But I might choose, you know, the house that Major Despain lives in, and think about how Sardi's reaction to that house and to his father. And I don't know, some lit people are not in here, so they don't know that. But I would give my answer, what I want to look like with them. And then I would say, well, what do y'all think about this? You know, does this make sense to you? Did y'all see this? Because like, it's kind of like with poetry. I tell them, you know, everybody's ideas and their thoughts are different from each other based on our own experiences that we have, based on that prior knowledge that we have and what we don't know. And so if I put my prompt question out there, I like to ask them, well, what do y'all think about this? Because, you know, do you think that, do you see this, or can you add something to this?
Okay.
That's what I normally do, is I try to get them to answer me back to see if they see some of the things that I see, or
so that's what I'm talking about with modeling, though. You are defaulting to the professor being the leader and saying, do you see what I see? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are there any questions? What you want to
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when I ask them about, let's just say this house.
I understand what you're saying, Allison.
See what I see. I say, okay, what might this house represent to you, or whatever like that. They don't have to tell me the same exact thing.
No. I understand that. I understand that. What I'm saying is, what we're modeling is a different type of thinking. So for example, when I want to get information from someone else, I ask them questions. I ask them explanatory. So for example, you've said, I saw this representing what? I might prompt, I might say, you know, Felicia, what do you think about how Tara saw this thing? Because she approached it this way. How does that relate? What assumptions and biases are hidden here? So basically what I'm asking you to do is model those higher order thinking questions, but that are very focused, that really get into very specific things, because I know we want to see how our students are thinking, but many of them have not been exposed to the deeper order questions yet. And so when I say model, I really mean going in and interacting with your students in a way you want to see them interacting with one another, asking the depth of questions that you want them asking that are done to elicit answers based from evidence. So basically what you want in a discussion is argument, discussion, whatever, from a point of evidence, not just opinion. Because even when you're discussing the book you're talking about, while everybody has an opinion, some of them are going to be more valid than others, because some of them take into account. I mean, I can come up and say, well, I chose this because of whatever, but we're learning things in class. And I want to show the student. So, and I want them referencing the things I'm sharing with them. I don't want them to just say, oh, well, I think it was a house because of this. I want them to say, well, in the book, they talked about this, and in lecture, we've talked about that. And that video we watched, they did this. So I think this, we want them.
But that's what I'm saying. We do that.
Right. And that's what you're looking for in a discussion. So if you're modeling that, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's
that's
great.
What I was talking about. That's the way that I do it. I pull the evidence from the story. So we're on the same page.
Right. And that's what we want our students doing. We're asking our students to, why do you say this? Not, especially if it's an opinion, why is this your opinion? Because we want to see their thinking. We want to see how it works. Now, I did mention that the fishbowl, the reason it can reduce your grading is because you only grade a small portion each week. All of the students don't get that. That's how the fishbowl can be done to reduce your grading. It's also how the fishbowl can be done to model the kinds of discussions you want to see in the classroom. You can email those students and prompt them, because we want them doing the thinking. So now I want to take you to a next strategy, which is called the spider web discussion. Has anyone heard of the spider web technique? All right. So this technique has been around for a long time. The professor's been doing this technique for probably almost 2 decades now. And this is a method similar that's used to the Philip K. Executor Academy, which is a really high-end elite school. And I wish everywhere could teach that way, but we can't, because we have a lot more students in our class. But what the spider web discussion is going to do is, and this is more of a philosophy, it's about understanding that learning is complex and it's going to play out over time. So the goal here is to sort of introduce students to a set of norms for discourse. So we're going to do a little group norming. And spider web technique comes from, one, the concept of a spider web. And if you break any link, if you break one of the major links in the spider web, or two, it starts to fall apart, because all of the parts are important. And this is where we try to teach students how to have discourse that is interactive and not one person talking to the group and then another person talking to the group. So spiderweb is also an acronym for the type of process it is. It is synergetic. It is team oriented. It is balanced, and it's group graded, which freaks people out at first, because the first couple of times you do it, you can be lucky if you get a C. But just because something's graded doesn't mean it has to be part of the overall final grade. So that said, synergetic, it's practices. It's not a one-time activity, but a process. It's independent because students run these discussions and they self-assess. It's developed, the discussion goes somewhere, you're seeing progress. And the main goal is, it's more than a discussion. It's exploration. It is getting to a area where you have a better understanding. So the rubric is the cornerstone of this, because the students need to understand the kinds of things they're focusing on. And I mean things like focus, active listening, clarity, interest. So think back to the conversation, the discussion we watched earlier. Think about how you observed each other, what they were doing. They all took turns speaking, but they didn't really interact strongly with one another. And that's kind of what we want to do, is we want to focus on this effective collaboration. We want to promote engaging in argument from evidence rather than opinion. This is where we're going to scaffold sort of what discourse skills look like, because effective communication skills, which in our online classes, we're going to have to sort of develop through our discussion boards. This is going to affect every aspect of their professional life. So the success of this type of discussion really depends on our preparation. And by that, I mean, we have provided enough content for them to engage in before they participate, that they are prepared to have the type and level of discussion we want them to. Okay, does that make sense? So what a spider web does, what the process is, this is kind of what a spider web discussion looks like. And what happens with the spider web discussion is, and I have done this in online classes, the ones you see here, what I do is I start in my online class. I teach an online faculty learning community, and we do this technique in there. And I go in and I look at the way the students are engaging with one another after their first discussion and after their second. And once I look at this, how they're engaging, I can reach out to them and say, okay, this is how you're participating. This is how the other people are participating. The goal is, and the reason this is so important that this is a group grade, is because you want them to take accountability for pulling everyone into the conversation. So the shy people, the way you get them to converse, you can ask them questions. That's how we do it in class. You know, we occasionally change the way we're asking questions to get people to look at it differently. So in this process, that's what we're doing. We're going to organize the students in a classroom. You do it in a circle. In the discussion board, you would organize them into groups and you would give them their prompt and they would discuss it. Now in a big class, I would probably divide them up into smaller groups so that they're not overwhelmed. Most of our D2L, Brightspace, Blackboard, Moodle, all of them have ways to divide your students up into groups. And you can teach them these roles. So you might have someone who's a recorder. They're the ones that are going to be tracking the way other people are responding to one another. You might have someone whose job is to be the primary questioner, and they've got to have 3 prompting questions to keep the discussion going. So there are these different roles, and I give you a whole bunch of those roles in a handout. But the purpose of those roles is to allow you to see the patterns that are emerging in the room. Okay, you want to see the patterns of communication that are going on, because that's where we're missing out. We tend to say, respond to one of your peers and do this, but that's not how a discussion works. So we have all of these things that we've done in discussion boards for so long, which are, you know, respond to the prompt, respond to 2 of your peers, but that's not really what we want them doing. We want them discussing with one another. So we want to teach them what a discussion looks like in this environment and let them see. Now, the cool thing about this is once your students get comfortable with this process, initially you are not going to participate, okay? This is probably one of the hardest pieces of a spider web discussion. These are the non-negotiables. 1, if you're using the spider web technique, you are not going to talk to them once the discussion has started. You are going to record. And so you're just going to observe. And I will tell you, there's going to be some moments of silence. There are going to be some awkward pauses. But eventually, they're going to start discussing because you're going to have provided them the criteria that you're looking for in the discussion. The criteria is, you know, that they don't interrupt one another, that they ask questions to elicit further information. They pull in people that aren't engaging. No one monopolizes the conversation. So all of those things are things that they're going to be aware of, that whether one another's staying on topic. And as you go through that, the rubric I'm talking about is really just your physical evidence of group norming. It's what you expect to see when you have a discussion. I have given you a sample rubric. as well. So what you want to do is, as you observe this process, so there's spiderweb roles, there's coding you can use. So this morning when you guys were doing your discussion, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, let's see if I can get it to focus. No. I drew out the spiderweb discussion to see who responded to who. Did they respond with questions? Did they engage? What did it do? And that way I could, if I wanted to, go back and say, okay, Heather, this is what I observed from you. Casey, this is what I observed. How could you modify this to make it a better discussion next time? So the part about being silent is really to force the students to step in and step up. They are used to us as instructors being the ones who get the conversation going, who keep it going. We don't really want that. We want them taking ownership. Of course, we know the content. We're the experts, more or less. There's always someone who's more expert and always someone who's less. And these processes that I'm talking about show them that they have expertise too. And it grows to develop that expertise. A purpose of formative assessment, which is what all of these discussion techniques are for us. There are ways of formatively assessing where our students are and what they're doing, is the idea that students should be able to use the feedback directly and immediately to improve understanding. So when they're doing these types of things, they're actually applying metacognition at the debrief stage, but also as the information's being captured in the way they're going through their conversations. So it's really important to build that for the students so that you as the instructor who's observing gets a good sense of the whole class as well as an individual student's understanding of the subject that you're pulling in there, because you can see how they're engaging. You can see their thinking because they're articulating that to one another. They're using evidence. This is a very important piece. One of those rubrics is uses evidence and resources to support your opinions. I mean, everybody's got an opinion, but you've got to have evidence or reason to back that opinion up. And that's what we want to teach our students, to work from that position of evidence. So maybe in your coding, let me show you an example of what the coding might look like. Let's see if I've got that handy. No, these are the, let me share this with you instead. So I mentioned there are roles that you can share, and this is part of the instructional content that I'll share with you so that you can use these. Let me stop the share really quickly and share a different document. All right, can you see the spiderweb roles? Somebody nod. Casey, can you see them? Okay, so for example, if you're doing these in smaller groups, in your breakout rooms, once you've taught the students this process, given them the instructions, maybe you've got 5 people in a group. These you can actually have more. You can have 8 to 10 people in a spiderweb discussion easily. Some faculty use entire class in a spiderweb discussion. But once you've taught them the technique, you may have a web grapher, and these roles would rotate between different discussions. You have the 3-question asker, who is the person who's going to prompt with questions. You have a key passage leader. You may have a rubric leader. All of these roles are things that you can break down into your course depending on what your goal for the discussion is. So you might not need a key passage leader if you're not doing a literature class. Maybe you're in a physics class. And just so you know, I know there may be some science and math people out there, some STEM folks. I highly encourage you to look at Alexa's book, which is linked, because this technique is being used in physics and science and math classrooms in the higher education arena to really incredible results. reducing the number of failures, reducing the number of withdrawals, and also raising overall outcomes. So afterwards, you want to give students time to evaluate the web. So what you're going to do is, if you've created the web, you're going to post an image of what that web looks like so that, and discuss it so that students can see where they could have done things differently, how they could have done things better. And that's a really important piece. Now, the last piece is students are going to self-assess. They're going to look at their web. They're going to look at the comments based on whether you've given comments or whatever. They're going to decide how they met the criteria. Did they engage everybody? Did everybody have a balance, or did somebody, monopolize conversation? They're going to give themselves a grade. And typically the first time you do it, somebody's going to give the group an A. But that's when you go in and you say, okay, let's look at this with the criteria. Did we do this? Yes or no? Did we do this? How did we do this? And quite often they end up saying, ooh, well, we only did about half of that, which means we all got a C. And you work towards the A. And they work towards the A because they now know what it's going to look like. So you set all this up front. There is some front-loaded effort, but once you get this in place, it takes off a lot of that effort later in the class. Students actually become very good at kind of self-assessing how they're doing in the discussion. And I will tell you, there's some YouTube videos where you can watch these discussions in action at various grade levels and see just how well students engage in stuff that I wouldn't expect them to be able to engage in. It's pretty impressive. So I want to talk a little bit more about the questions that engage. We heard earlier, someone mentioned, let's see, Allison mentioned, I believe, open-ended questions. Somebody mentioned creativity. So essential questions are those things that they're deep, they're fundamental, often not easy to answer, but they can guide student learning. So when you look at your prompt, is it thought-provoking? Is it intellectually engaging? Does it call for higher order thinking? Is it likely to generate engagement? Is it likely to generate insight or deeper understanding? Does it point to those transferable ideas both within and maybe with outside your discipline? Does it raise additional questions? All of these things are part of essential questions, those that we really want students to grapple with. Now, one of the things I want to share with you about this is that an essential question is really more about why you ask the question, and that's more important than how. Whether or not something is an essential question depends on your purpose or the context. So what are students intended to do with this? Is this something that they're going to intend them to tackle and expect to associate with learning objectives and assessments? And if so, how are they tied together? And we want to make that transparent. So I want to share an activity. Let me get that. Let me do this real quick. So I was talking about essential questions, and what I want to look at now is a feature of essential questions. And this is how you decide whether your questions are really going to evoke the kind of response you want to evoke. So on our horizontal axis, we have generativity from high to low. And that is, how likely is the question to generate engagement? You know, how likely is it to make students want to do something, to deepen their understanding or to see new possibilities? On the genuineness level, which is the vertical axis, that is, how much are students going to care about this? How much interest are they going to have in digging deeper into this responds. Remember that essential questions are those grapple worthy. They're the ones that not only are worth wrestling with or require wrestling with, but are worth wrestling. So let's look at this. Let's see what it looks like in action. And this is going to be something for you guys to share. So again, if you will unmute yourselves, let me share a different screen. So this is the question sort routine. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this technique, but I have provided instructions for it as well. A question sort is used by students. You can use this to help students learn to ask better questions. So we're going to look at some discussion prompts. So I'm going to grab one of these at the bottom and we're going to read. What distinguishes a good read from great literature? So where do you think that would fall in this? Is that likely to create engagement? Is it genuine? Where would you put this? Somebody tell me where you would put this and why.
Well, it's an open-ended question.
Okay.
It lets someone, it's a good read, is kind of a relaxing language that might be meeting someone where they are and letting them really discuss what they think is the difference between something that's fun to read versus great literature. So I think it would give interest and I think it would be high.
So that was from a non-literature person. Let me ask a different question. Casey, thank you for saying that, because something you said struck me. You said good read, something to enjoy, as opposed to great literature, which by definition of the way you said it is something you don't enjoy. So I think you see what I'm saying? I mean, that's not meant to call her out. It's just the way it works. So I would say, what distinguishes a good read from great literature? It's liable to generate some stuff, but I don't think students are going to really be that interested. Now, keep in mind, I am not talking about our literature majors. I'm talking about our first year and two of a community college student. I'm not real sure they're going to be highly engaged with what great literature is yet. They've been exposed to it. Many of it have been exposed to things that, they don't know why it's even called great literature, because to them, it doesn't make sense. I think that these are all, by the way, real discussion board questions, but I would say that that's unlikely to generate a lot of real insight. I'm not sure how much great literature they're going to have been exposed to at this point. So that would be my thought. So let's look at another one. How about this one? How is behavioral interviewing used to screen job candidates? How likely is that to engage students? Come on, somebody, be brave. Be the student.
I don't know that it's going to generate engagement and deep understanding of new possibilities, because you're basically going to get a list.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost no different than just an objective multiple choice question, almost, kind of a matching game kind of thing. Can I ask why this has high on the left and low on the right rather than
it's your choice. You can set it up whichever way you want, as long as you know which areas it is.
All right.
I do it this way because this is my number. For me, I'll share my thinking, because that's what I want us to do with students. This is the first quadrant on this board. To me, that first quadrant, the thing I want to pound, that's my number one. So for me, I want high to be right there at that beginning, because that's where I want everything to live. You can do it the other way, because sometimes we think of going from low to high. So it depends on what kind of, how you're doing, but you pay attention to that. And I'm glad you noticed it, because that's why I use it this way. I have seen other people set it up reverse. Discuss the main character in a reading. High or low?
I think that'll be high.
Okay, high what?
Um,
High interest?
Yeah, I think that'll be high interest because sometimes we see different things or different people as the main character in a reading, and like to or see different things from that, which will kind of be like almost a debate on what they seen and what they didn't see.
So
But
let
I
me,
want to know, what do you want me to discuss?
right? Okay, so let me pull up another one. Is it ethical to create genetically edited humans? Under what circumstances, if any? How about that one? You guys in here, of the ones we've looked at so far, which do you think would be the most exciting to engage in with your peers?
I
That
think
one.
that question.
Elaine?
I
Thank
have
you,
one.
Kamala.
I have used that one about ethically, the ethical question
Mm-hmm.
about genetically modifying humans, and everybody in the class gets into that one. So I think that one is high.
And you are correct. So let's look at one more, and then we're going to go back. Sorry about that. I moved it too quickly. When is the restriction of freedom a good thing? What do you think about that one?
I think that's also going to be high. Like they're definitely more personal in pulling out the students' personal opinions, and that can definitely be a little more charged and get a little more reaction.
That's what I'm talking about. These are not bad statements at all. These are not bad questions. What they are is things that, so how is behaviorally used to screen job candidates? You're pretty much hoping everybody's going to give you pretty much the same answer because it's used a specific way. There are some pretty strong, I know there's opinion tied to distinguishing a good read from great literature. But again, there's some fairly standard answers. We're looking for things that are going to make students grapple with something, and freedom, it's a hot topic. Ethicality in the sciences or in medicine, again, likely to engage because people are going to have some strong opinions. And when you have required that they use evidence to support that's a key piece to me. And I see that missing in a lot of discussion boards. We don't ask students for evidence. Now, I don't mean cite things. I'm not saying go cite a paper. I'm saying, in Dr. Pilkington's paper, he referred to this, and I believe, you don't have to give me the citing of all that. I can go look that up, and so can the students. And I'm not trying to get them to do APA, MLA, or anything else. I'm trying to get them to engage. So if they tell me it's ethical to do this, they're going to have to explain to me why and support it with evidence. Why do you believe this is ethical? Because it's not just personal. I mean, that's not what it's about. So I use this with my students when they're coming up with questions. And I teach them this process of question sorts because I want them to understand what you're trying to get at when you ask questions. Questions for learning, questions for engagement. So that's sort of what we're going to do. And I will say, it is not easy to formulate these questions, but when you've got one because your students engage, and they engage more than you've asked them to. So one of the things I suggest doing with discussion boards and what I wish I had done with this, but I didn't get to it. I was going to originally make this 4 documents just like this and send you into breakout rooms, have you sort them and come back and compare. But I think that's worth doing with your students and with your peers. One of the sad pieces that I see in design is, especially when we're designing our courses, is we're often in a vacuum. We don't have anybody to bounce our ideas off of. And you come up with something like, what distinguishes a good read from great literature? And that does. It does for us, if we're in the field, that's a really engaging question. but it might not be the best thing to engage a student who hasn't really been exposed to a lot of great literature yet. And who doesn't, maybe we don't even agree on the terms of what great literature is. So you want things that students can engage with that forces them to dig into your content. Does that make sense?
I think that's a really key, Mary Helen, and I appreciate you raising that, because one of the things I'm thinking about is these questions can be very provocative, but the question is, what benefit are the students going to get from the discussion? So the timing is really important to me. Have you covered enough course content that's relevant to the question so they can make informed comments? So it's not just a discussion of opinion, but there's an application of course content. So we've talked about this the last few classes. Now let's put it to practice. So I think timing is another very critical issue.
Yes, it is. And especially when you're in an online course, it's making sure you provided them the content that allows them to engage with this. And the way you get them to engage with that content is, say, in that criteria, you tell them that they have to use the content you have provided to support their opinions. That's a requirement of the discussion response, is that you've supported it based on, that way they can't just come in at the last minute and answer a question. They've got to refer to the videos you've shared. They've got to refer to the readings you've shared. They've got to refer to any other activity you've had them to do. That becomes a part of what they're doing. And that's a really key piece. I mentioned earlier that it's the preparation up front, making sure they have the content to be able to engage in this. All right, let me go back and do the PowerPoint again. Let's see if I can get back to the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint? Are we back there?
Yes, ma'am.
So these are some discussions, and the PowerPoint's uploaded as well. These are some questions I want you to start asking yourself after each of your online discussions, your in class or your synchronous discussions. I want you to ask yourself this: did the technique, did what you did in that discussion match your learning goals and objectives? The learning goal you have for that module, did this discussion further that? Was it appropriate to the student? Did it keep them engaged? Did it promote learning? Can you read those discussion prompts and say, whoa, I can see they're going somewhere? Did it provide you with information about student understanding? If you answered yes to most of those, it's probably a really solid discussion. If you can't answer yes to most of these with a discussion, then it's probably not really a discussion. It's a different kind of activity. I know people use it for participation. I know some people use it for attendance. But if you're using it for the purpose of furthering understanding of your course goals, these are the questions you want to be asking yourself. So what's the instructor's role in a discussion board? To post or not post, and is that the question? So what do you think? How often do you guys participate in your discussion boards? Shout out some.
I post. I ask questions if they typo something. I will ask them to either further explain it, or that it was an excellent post, or why did you post it this way, or do you have any further information?
Excellent, excellent. So you're asking them sort of diagnostic questions. You're modeling the desired responses. I know that Allison mentioned that earlier. Model feedback to one another. Model the kind of feedback to students you want them to see them giving one another. Relate the topic to real life circumstances. Model that. It's really important that we show them what we expect. If you expect your students to be in there 2 or 3 days a week, you might want to go in there. You don't have to post every time, but you got to read and you got to make summaries and you got to show that you're there. I will say that if you're aware, if you teach online, there is a requirement to do regular and substantive interactions. Okay, that's a requirement for your college to really receive certain types of financial aid. The discussion board is one of the easiest ways to do that type of interaction in an online class. So that's the piece. You want to demonstrate what a substantive interaction looks like. That's where we're going with this. Evaluating the discussion responses. So what are you looking for? Are you giving people credit for posting? Or are you setting it up so that, okay, you're going to get high marks if you advance the discussion? Do you consider marking down for cluster posting? So what I mean by cluster posting is, how many of your students post a whole bunch of stuff the last day that it's due? They go in and respond to 5 people on that last day and they throw theirs up there. That's considered cluster posting. And it has no real value because they're doing it at the last minute. There's been no process of discussion. So why do you get high marks for that? So those are the things to think about. And be thinking about what you're doing in terms of quality versus quantity. What you want that discussion board to be. I hear from faculty all the time, they hate discussion boards because they've been in courses where there were crappy discussions. Well, I agree with you. I don't like a bad discussion either. I don't like a forced discussion. But you give me something like, can restriction of freedom be a good thing? Is there ever a time, when might you want censorship? Where does censorship exist in our society? And is it a good thing or a bad thing, and why? Those are things that make us want to engage. And that's what you want to do with your students. I want to share one last technique with you for grading. And this puts some serious onus on the students. And I want to show you what it looks like. If I've got it handy. I want to share with you a portfolio approach to grading. When you use this method in your class, roughly your quantity is part of the course grade, your discussion, and I just use 15% as examples, okay? So we're looking at quantity, timeliness, and quality. But in this portfolio approach, what happens is the students, a couple of times a semester, maybe you do it twice a semester, maybe you do it 3 times a semester. At those given points, they are going to go back and evaluate their own contributions to the discussion. And they're going to pick during that, let's say the first 4 weeks, they're going to pick their very best discussion response post. And they're going to explain to you why it was so good, why they thought it was appropriate, and what they learned from it. They're also going to pick the 2 best peer posts in the class, or whatever number you choose, and they're going to articulate why they think that was the best. And you're going to grade those portfolios. You're not going to grade all the discussions that they've been doing. You're going to grade their portfolios. Do that 3 times a semester. Now, let me show you an example of what a rubric would look like. Sorry. Let me share. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well or not. So you'll have to let me know if you can see it, if it's clear enough. Oh. Well. See if I can make it bigger. Can y'all see that okay? Can you see anything?
No, ma'am.
Let's try. How about now? Can you see the portfolio rubric?
Yeah.
Right.
Can you make it bigger?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure I can with this because it's an image, not, but let's see. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, forget the pieces over there because all I really want you to look at is the types of things that are being considered here. The portfolio includes all the things you tell them you want in it. Sharing insight, you define that. Shows you've deeply engaged with the course material. Notice that these things are not weighted equally. And that's really important because it's what you're focusing on. And an assignment, if you wanted to use an assignment, let me see if I've got, I know I have one. Let me see. Let me share that. I'm not sure you can see it. So, and the portfolio is the really a major piece I wanted to share with you. So this is what an assignment might look like. Okay, can y'all see that? The week 1 through 7 discussion portfolio? You see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this particular one, 3 best discussion posts, and you've given them the criteria. So they're actually grading themselves and explaining why they did it. There's also a template that you can do this with. Tells them whether you're going to do formatting. Now, I typically don't require a lot of fancy formatting in discussion posts. In this, I would, because this, I'm asking them to give me a refined version of their work, okay? But I'm looking at the quality of their discussions here and how this forces them to explain why it's good, how it was good, how they're going to improve it. This allows you an insight into their thinking while at the same time really reducing your load on grading with the discussion board. This approach really focuses on the discussion quality. You want to encourage students to grow their participation. This also encourages kind of a bigger community. And this really enables you to give more and deeper feedback because you're focused on what they've shared instead of every time and trying to go through and figure out everything they've responded and how they did it and things like that. All right, just about done. And I know let me go back to the PowerPoint one more time. So students want clear instructions. They want prompts that take them towards a particular learning goal. They want to know that this is not busy work, and they want to know you're there. And they want to focus on ideas more than the presentation itself. So for this last piece, I want you guys to think about is connect, extend, challenge. Thank you guys for coming to this today. I want you to think about the connections you can draw between your practice and what you've learned about in here. Any new ideas you got? What was further illuminated? What pushed your thinking a little bit more? And what challenges do you see in this? So I know that it's close to the end. We got about 2 more minutes by my clock. Are there any questions, or does anyone want to share a thought on this last piece of anything that's come up in your mind? What about questions?
One, the portfolio approach is really interesting to me. Just because I feel like if I do it weekly, I'm just clicking on rubrics in Blackboard, and it's not really giving them a lot. So I like, and then it allows them to have an off week and not destroy their grade. I mean, so I like that idea. And did you mention something about, I think I might have missed it at the beginning, about like a Google Doc or something that has this stuff with it and all?
All right, so let me show that to you really quickly, and all of this will be shared with all of the participants. Let me share, and I know I don't know if they've sent it out yet or they're going to do it after the conference, but let me share this screen too. So this is a Google Drive. This is where all of the presentation information is going to be, and they will send it out. This is a copy of my presentation, but this is my handout for you. Can y'all see that okay? You'll find here, email to contact me. You'll find resources. These are all PDF documents, fishbowl, videos, and other things, books of interest that are books I've read that have been pulled into here. And then this website to explore, Project Zero Toolbox, that's where you'll see more about That's where visible thinking came from. The Connect Extend challenges talked about there, lots of these other things. So all of the stuff I've shared today is here. And if you need more or want more information, shoot me an email and I'm happy to share any others with you. Any other questions or thoughts? Please don't forget, you should have gotten an email that asks you to provide feedback on the sessions you participate in. That will help us as we go forward to make this better. This is our first, and we're hoping to continue this on an annual basis.
Thank you, Mary Helen.
Thank you guys for your participation.
Enjoy it.
And hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Alicia, are you still here? I don't see the next, who am I looking for here? Oh, this is you. You were next. Then let me make you host. I can't hear you.
Let's see. How about now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, gotcha. Audio settings, even though I selected what was already selected, but you know what? It's
So you are now the host.
fantastic. Thank you.
How's his job going?
Great session, by the way. It was awesome.
Part-time.
Do I need to stop the recording and then restart it? What do we decide on?
As far as I know, you stop it at the end and then it just runs.
So it'll run the whole time. So we're good with that.
Yes, I think that's what, if you want to stop it and start it, I believe in Zoom. Go on and stop it and restart it because that might help it segregate it for us.
And that's what I wasn't sure what we ended up deciding on. So I'll go ahead and stop it now and then
And then restart it.